This video is by way of an appeal for peace between two individuals about whom you may have heard nothing. One is called Sam Shamoun and the other is called Christian Prince. The reason I'm making this video is because I was watching some videos by chance yesterday, the 18th of September 2024, and it seemed that some conflict had broken out between these two men. And it goes back to the issue of Pope Francis's statement on the Friday the 13th of September 2024, when he said that all religions are different paths to the one God. In another video, previous video, I've explained how I consider, according to Catholic teaching, that that is a false statement by Pope Francis. But nonetheless, it's been the source of this problem because Christian Prince apparently produced a video. He did produce a video, I didn't see it, but he referred to it himself in another video, and others referred to it, where Christian Prince calls the Pope a fake Pope. Now, I shouldn't go too far ahead of myself. Sam Shamoun is a encyclopedically knowledgeable Christian, maybe a Catholic or almost a Catholic, not quite sure where he is on that, but he was an evangelical Protestant, a hater of the Catholic faith, an enemy of the church. But from about a year or two ago, or perhaps even more, I started seeing videos of him extolling the Blessed Virgin, and sometimes in tears. So this has been a great conversion. But he is so knowledgeable about the Bible, it's as if he has it imprinted on his brain. And he knows a lot about Islam too. And so he's a great resource for Christians to learn about Christianity and Islam, and that he's now pretty much one of us is a great thing because he can help us learn about the Bible from a Catholic perspective, which is the only valid perspective. On the other hand, there's a character called Christian Prince, whose face we never see, about whom we know next to nothing, except that he's an Arab. We don't know what part of the Middle East he's originally from. And he is so incognito because he has some very hard truths to say about Islam, which of course could get him, you know. And so he has to remain invisible. It's just the way it is with Islam. It's not a civilized religion, and one has to take steps accordingly. But his great strength is that being an Arab, he speaks Arabic. He knows when what we're reading in English is not a correct translation of what is in the Arabic, either in the Quran or in the traditions. Sometimes there are some traditions in Islam, they're hadith they call them, that are so embarrassing that they don't translate them into English. They're so toe-curlingly embarrassing. So a person who speaks Arabic, and he's not the only Arabic-speaking Christian, there are others as well, but he seems to be the most active. He is always online, it seems, engaging with Muslims and bringing them out of Islam, out of that sinister religion, and often into Christianity. So that's at great personal cost to him because he can never be known. We know what happened to Salman Rushdie. Well, Rushdie's satanic verses were only a minor thing compared to what Christian Prince has to say. In fact, Sam Shamoun has also said things which would put him at risk. So we have Christian Prince, who is not a Catholic. He seems to be some sort of born-again Christian. But unlike born-again Christians, by and large, he's not hostile to us. He doesn't condemn us. He doesn't trash us. He does so, speak his mind. He seems to have the character which is day after day willing to face Muslims and to bring them face to face with the errors, contradictions, absurdities of their religion and evil aspects of their religion. He's not going to be a character like any other. He speaks his mind, he's blunt. So he says to us, after what happened in Singapore on the 13th of September 2024, that's a fake pope. It's a fake pope, he's evil. He says he's not a true pope, he's not a real Catholic. And he's also said that we Catholics, we pray to, we worship idols, we have idols. You might think, well, I'm listening to this guy, he's saying these things, what do I think? Well, Sam Shamoun went a bit ballistic on this. He'd also done a video which talked about how erroneous Francis was, but nonetheless he's still the Pope, and one can commend Sam Shamoun for that, because he's absolutely right. But he's torn into Christian Prince for simply saying he's a fake Pope and we have idols, we worship idols. And there was a late night for me, because in England, unfortunately the Americans who had a proper Stuart king in 1776, it might have been they'd have aligned their time zones to ours, but stupid thing to say. But nonetheless, it was late night for me. I was watching Sam Shamoun, or the back end of the discussion of Sam Shamoun and William Albrecht discussing Christian Prince's statements. William Albrecht is another Catholic, a cradle Catholic, I think, unlike Sam Shamoun. And William Albrecht was also, criticising Christian Prince. William Albrecht, by the way, is a brilliant man when it comes to the fathers of the church, looking at their documents, what they've got to say, how that buttresses the Catholic faith. So they tore into Christian Prince, and you might say, well, yeah, talking about Francis, that's a fake pope, talking about idols, but I'm not doing that. You see, I've always seen Christian Prince as somebody who is like many Protestants, and Sam Shamoun should really think carefully. Christian Prince, as he said, and I've seen this on his videos, he really rejects people, Protestants, who will trash the Catholic faith, trash the Catholic Church. He'll get them out of his live stream. He's very respectful for us, but of course he has his limitations, because Christian Prince is a Protestant, or a born-again Christian. He doesn't like to label himself. A lot of born-again Christians don't like to be labelled, but we know they come out of the Protestant Reformation. Their way of looking at Christianity was really unknown until 500 years ago. But put that to one side. They're in a position where they think they've got it right. But if they're going to be respectful to the Catholic Church and the Catholic faith, albeit with their disagreements, I don't want to slag them off. I don't want to badmouth them. I don't want to get on their case. And Christian Prince is one of those who, not only is he doing great work in relation to Islam, but he's respectful to us. And I think we have to look at what he's said recently in light of that fact. He's on the outside. There's Francis, man dressed in white, Pope of the Catholic Church, saying things which are not true, that all religions are ways to God, when we know Scripture tells us Jesus is the way, the truth and the life. So what is a non-Catholic to do? Christian Prince didn't say that he's Satan in white, something like that. He says he's a fake pope, which suggests there's such a thing as a true pope. And I think, had this been the reign of Pope Benedict, Christian Prince would never have said that. He would say Benedict was a true pope, even though Christian Prince would deny the validity of the papacy in the way we see it. He'd simply see the Pope as the chief pastor of this particular congregation called Catholicism, called the Catholic Church, one amongst many different congregations. And what a person like Christian Prince expects is that our leaders follow the gospel, even though at the margins we may get things wrong. What Christian Prince saw was Francis pretty much gutting the gospel. I have to say that. When you start saying there's other religions are ways to Christ, ways to God, you are gutting the gospel. Because it's like removing Jesus from the path, the only path to the Father. So naturally, a person who has goodwill towards Catholics and the Catholic Church is going to be mystified at least and enraged at worst. And will say things which are very blunt, which we Catholics won't say because we have an understanding of the papacy which differs from non-Catholics. But we can't expect non-Catholics to be as respectful as we know we ought to be. And we know they ought to be, but they're not yet aware of how they ought to be towards the papacy. We just listen to how respectful they generally are and see everything in that context. Then when we come to the question of sacred images, we know that those images are entirely valid and proper, but a person outside the Catholic Church can naturally say, this is idol worship. Well, actually, I think it's difficult for them to say it's idol worship. And I'm not saying Christian Prince used that phrase, because it's really completely absurd for a Protestant to say we're sitting in front of a statue or we're kneeling in front of a statue and worshipping a statue. I mean, this is the 21st century. We know that that statue is not a god or goddess or really the person, the saint. I mean, is this Jesus to me? I've got statues of Jesus. Is this all my statues Jesus? Are there several Jesuses in my house? Several Marys in my house? Of course not. We don't worship the thing. But nonetheless, one could say, if one's a Protestant and one doesn't understand the truth, that's idolatry. So I don't mind them saying that. Sam Shamoun and others should think, right, well, when I was a Protestant, was I respectful towards the Catholics as Christian Prince is? Probably not. Probably Sam would say I was more vicious before I saw the error of my ways. So we have to cut a little slack to those outside of the church who are not yet with us entirely, but when they're respectful towards us, they're partly with us, you know, they really are. They're on their way, potentially. And so I think we ought to... What grieved me yesterday about the live stream of Sam Shamoun and William Albrecht is they're willing to say, oh, Christian Prince, look at his English, it's not very good. Because he's native Arab. His English, when he speaks, when he writes, it's not brilliant. Okay, so what? Why even say that? It's nasty. I have to say that's nasty. I don't like it. Not one bit. What else was there? His live streams are boring. Sam Shamoun also said. His live streams are boring. He's got nothing to say. Nothing of substance to say. Well, that's just totally unnecessary. There are people who, in the Christian world, Christians, have such a limited understanding of Christianity. There are non-Christians, heathens, who have even less an understanding of Christianity. That if somebody is doing a live stream, no matter how unelevated you think it might be, it's a great gift from God that somebody is bothering to make the effort to do a live stream, to put up a video. We must not be bitchy about another person, like some schoolgirl when what they're like. They get together and they hate some other schoolgirl for whatever reason. I don't know the ways of women, the ways of females, but fact is, this is bitchy. Mustn't be like this. Especially to one who's effectively a soldier facing the greatest, most sinister darkness called Islam, day in, day out, for years. But although I'm critical of that approach that Sam Shamoun and William Albrecht took, what can we do about Christian Prince? He doesn't believe in the priesthood as a necessary element of the Christian life. we can go through all kinds of things to show that the Catholic faith is true. But if I were to do that, we'd be here all night. The key point is that I would like somebody who has some kind of connection with Christian Prince, but who's a respected YouTuber, theologian, Catholic theologian, to reach out behind the scenes and say, look, this is why we have images. This is why we say Francis is Pope, despite what he says. This is why we have problems with the idea of the phrase fake Pope. Mind you though, folks, there are plenty of Catholics called sedevacantists who say Francis is not Pope. There can be different reasons for saying this, but we have to understand that it's not just Protestants who are saying it. Again, a reason to cut slack to the Protestant. But you see, I would have hoped that Sam Shamoun and William Albrecht would have dealt with this problem without videoing. It's not what we want. Of course, the Muslims will have a great laugh with this, but that doesn't matter actually. It doesn't matter at all. False religion, so what? It doesn't matter what they do. But what is unfortunate is that here we have Christian men who I don't think are conducting themselves in a Christian fashion. It's no use saying, I'll cook you, I'll roast you, and all this kind of stuff, or whatever it is, or you know, I'll destroy you on a debate. This is not the Catholic way. And I would say to William Albrecht, who was not directly affected by this exchange between Christian Prince and Sam Shamoun, really I'd ask you to speak to Sam Shamoun about how we must present ourselves, how we must be inside to other people. Sure, if somebody, you can see my YouTube videos, if somebody comes at me, I mean, I won't make it personal, but I'll really get stuck in, my tone will be different than if somebody comes to me, oh, let's have a discussion about why I think that you Catholics pray to Mary and you shouldn't do that. But we must really try and have those discussions outside of the internet first. And of course, if somebody goes on and on trashing the faith, then you can say, well, look, I've said this to them privately, said that to them privately, but now I have to set this out because their followers are being misled. I'm just going to focus on one substantive issue. Not the papacy. I have lots of videos on YouTube about the papacy, but I don't have so many about images. There are some, but not so many. I've got an entire kind of set of videos which headed the papacy, so they're easy to find. But on this issue of images, I'd like to spend a bit of time. So I thought it'd be useful to look at the Catechism. And I hope that somebody will be able to prevail upon these two gentlemen to stop any escalating YouTube warfare. But who knows? I don't know. Because I was so aggrieved by what I was watching yesterday, particularly from Sam and William's side. I thought, well, you know, I want to say something. Here's what the Catechism says about our images, and our statues. Paragraph 1160, 1160. Christian iconography expresses in images the same gospel message that Scripture communicates by words. Image and word illuminate each other. Pause. Imagine this. If the Protestants are right, no images, no statues. Let's just remember that for the past 2,000 years, until about 1870, there was no universal elementary education for the most advanced country in the world, Britain. Most people couldn't read or write. By the end of the 19th century, maybe most people could have an elementary knowledge of reading and writing. My grandmother from Wales, from North Wales, couldn't read or write. She was born in 1918. That might have been uncommon, I don't know. I would have asked her more questions had she lived longer. But illiteracy was common for most of the last 2,000 years. And if you go outside Britain, the most advanced country of its day, illiteracy was total. This is what, by the way, we should be careful about how we see Muslims. It goes back to what I was saying on another video about how the good Muslim may think Muhammad's a true prophet, may think the Quran's perfect, but they were never read it. They were never read any hadith. All they know is what their imam told them. Because they can't read and write. Because they never leave the village. That's most European, that's most world life and most European life until the late 19th century. So we have to be sympathetic to people. But the key point for me is this. If most people have been illiterate for the last 2,000 years, how are they to get to know the gospel? Preachers, you might say. Yeah, that's why the priesthood was established by Christ. A class of men to go out there, spread the gospel, to be evangelists, but also be fathers to the communities which are then established. It's a perfect system Jesus set up. It's called the Catholic Church. And it's hierarchically structured, so there's total accountability. Unlike the Protestants who have their pastor here, pastor there, no accountability. There's supreme accountability, like a pyramid to the top. That's how an organisation has to be built. And Jesus created the perfect organisation, but with imperfect men. But the organisation itself is perfect. So they preach. They preach. And when you kind of are a peasant, and you're sitting at Holy Mass on a Sunday morning, and you hear the preacher preaching, and you receive the Holy Eucharist, you go home, go about your business. The information that's gone into your head, how much of it has gone in? Of a sermon, how much do you remember? Sometimes I am completely daydreaming. I do that often in prayer. In prayers, I can't help it. The mind wanders. We should discipline, it's true. Discipline it. I think St. Therese of Lisieux may have said that she found the rosary difficult because, well, I think maybe boredom was what she was saying, not perhaps her mind wandering. But I pray the rosary every day. My mind wanders all over the place. But I persevere, I just keep going. All my prayers like that, keep going. But how much do I remember? How much do I take in? How much is taken in at Mass? In all the Masses we've ever had, how much is taken in? But I tell you this, if I see a statue or a painting, I'll remember that much better. I'll take in its message much better than somebody speaking to me or speaking at me. So, in the world of illiteracy, when I'm not going to be able to go and check out the sermon and read the Bible verses that are taught, because I've got no Bible, because we haven't got the printing press yet until about the mid-15th century, how am I going to really get the faith inside me? You've got to see those stained glass windows which depict biblical scenes, Old Testament and New Testament, the miracles of Jesus. This is all idolatry, isn't it? Well, I'll explain why it's not, but put it to one side and note the practical necessity of images. The practical necessity of statues. Now you might say, because basically a painting of Jesus is of the same category as a statue of Jesus. But the statue. So if you accept one, you have to accept the other. If you condemn one, you condemn the other, but I'm going to show that you shouldn't condemn them. And on a practical level, you've just seen how you can't condemn them because most of the human race has been illiterate forever. But a statue is a three-dimensional representation of a two-dimensional representation, which is the painting or the stained glass window. So a three-dimensional image allows more scope. So if you show the attempt by Abraham to offer his son Isaac in sacrifice, not Ishmael, Muslims, Isaac. If you depict that in a three-dimensional statue, then you're going to have even more of a vivid impact than a painting. A person can walk around the statue, but even if they're not walking around, they can pick up its three-dimensionality. So you imbibe the scene even more efficiently than if it's simply read to you. So the question though is, though I'm right practically, I'm pretty sure of that, as you know, pretty sure of that, as you can imagine, given what I've said, is it proper? Well, I'm just going to give you what is said in the Catechism about images. Now here as Catholics, we know that the Protestant position is untenable, which simply has the Bible. Something Christian Prince ought to grapple with. Somebody needs to tell him. Somebody needs to talk to him about this. That wonderful man needs to hear this. The Bible, whether you call it 66 books, 39 of the Old Testament, 27 of the New, or what we say, 46 of the Old Testament and 27 of the New, whatever way you look at it, this is a set of books. Somebody had to select them. Somebody had to put them together. Somebody had to refuse to include a whole world of other documents. Who did it? If it was just men that did it, then that could be fallible. We could have a Bible which is incomplete or overcomplete, if I can put it that way. Too many books in, false books in. Luther thought that with the book of James, the book of Revelation. That's what you get to when you get to private judgment, which is what Protestantism at its core is about. The Bible is given to us by the church established by Christ, its ministers. We can go to Pope Damasus I at Rome in 382, Council of Rome. We get the full list of Catholic books. And then we get to the Council of Hippo, 393, Council of Carthage, 397, and another one, Hippo again, in the 415, I think. Get that date right another time. So we have that. So we have to understand that if you are a Christian, you need to have an architecture around your religion. It can't just be the Bible. It has to be something that got that Bible to you. And if you accept there's an architecture, then what else is there in this architecture other than those Catholic councils? Well, there are councils and there are councils. I mentioned some councils, but there are councils at different levels. There are what are called ecumenical councils. I know with Catholics I'm talking to, it's like teaching grandmother to suck eggs. But it's worth saying, there are ecumenical councils. And these are where the entire church is represented. The entire church isn't present, but it's represented. And in that sense, through its representatives, it's present. And it makes collective decisions. Always with the agreement of the Pope, either present or he gives his subsequent agreement, or through his papal legates who agreed. As in the Council of Nicaea, the first Council of Nicaea, 2 papal legates signed the Decree of Nicaea before any of the great bishops of the East or West. 2 papal legates, ordinary priests. That shows you the authority of the Bishop of Rome, even then, in 325 AD. Nicaea, in the eastern part of the Roman Empire. Not in Italy, not in France, but over, way, way, way away. Still, the authority of the papacy is clearly demonstrated.